I guess we are live. Yeah.
Hello, friends.
I guess we are live. Yeah.
Hello, friends.
I guess we are live. Okay, we are live and hello everyone. Just let's give a minute and then we can start. Let me change it. This is good. Okay. Let's start with the session and you can able to hear me, right?
Yes.
Um, we can take questions in the chat after the conversation. But first, let me introduce you to our speaker today. He is Devashish Nigam, and he currently working as an RPA architect. He has over 10 years of experience in IT, and he was worked as a senior software engineer, and then he shifted to the business analyst, and then he shifted to RPA architect. So let's invite and thank you for accepting the invitation, Devashish. And
Thank you so much,
over
Aditya.
to you. You can tell a
So,
little
hello,
bit about
friends.
yourself, and we can start.
Sure. Hello, friends. Thanks for joining the session. I started my journey long back. I worked as in a support projects. Then I did my MBA. Post my MBA, I moved to a business analyst role. Since I always had a penchant for technology, I loved trying few things. So I realized RPA was something which came when I was in a business analyst role. I saw that I liked it. I thought I could quickly jump to this graph where, because RP at that point of time was going at the top, and I still see it's a graph is growing and you have a lot of opportunity. So I thought it would be good for me to move into RPA space. I then started doing development, etc. And it's if you see, it's pretty easy to pick up RPA. You have a lot of content available in terms of YouTube, in terms of certain vendors have their trainings uh, like well curated material. So, and then over the years with experience, etc., I continued with my journey in RPA, different roles, leading teams, etc. And so here I am as a RPA architect.
Yeah, and the first thing that I wanted to ask everyone, if you have any doubts, post them in the comment section. And also, this is not a pre-planned script. This is complete raw live. We are just telling answers on the move. And the first one that I wanted to ask you is what are your thoughts when you wanted to shift from software engineering? First, you are in a software engineering role, then you got into business analyst role. Have you decided that
So
you go into that role?
okay, so how I transitioned from my system engineer role to
Do
business analyst. So actually, I was pursuing like any other kid. I was pursuing. I was working with a IT firm. I was mostly on the shell scripting, so I was on the Unix side of things. And from there, I realized, like any other person who would want to pursue higher studies, due to peer pressure or peer pressure from the parents, I pursued a higher education. I did my MBA from Symbiosis Pune, Symbiosis International University Pune. While I was in my MBA years, I realized, since I had a previous work experience with IT firms, and I did my internship when again in the IT firms in the information security domain in terms of information security audits, ISO 27000 audits. So I then realized कि it's a area where I think so post my MBA I can join, and I got placed into another tech company post my as a campus placements. So the role which was offered was a role of a business analyst. I did a BA role there. I worked on multiple applications prior to starting my journey in RP. I worked on the Salesforce side. Then I worked on the as a BA. I worked on LMS, learning management system, which is a very neglected domain, but all your learning, employee trainings, etc., happen through learning management system. So I was part of the Saba. Saba Cloud is one of the tool for learning management. It's a leading tool in LMS. So I got a chance to work there. At the same time, I got an opportunity in my same organization. They were starting with RPA with one of the big vendor. It's now a very famous vendor. So I started my journey with that vendor, and hence hence now over the years I'm here.
No.
So it was a great journey, and I thought RP at that time was picking up, and I still see there are a lot of all big companies have big processes, but there are it's been you won't think like such big companies would ever had issues in terms of or blockages in terms of the processes, but you find here or there one of the processes which would you would think there is a need for automation. So now you as a BA, which I realized which BA gave me exposure is right now you get a requirement, you start designing, etc. So I always looked for why is it worth doing that? Is it worth taking the route of RPA? Can we do it through IT integration? So you do a ROI analysis, like whether it's which route to take, which would reap much more value, which would be much more value add for the client or your it could be client, could be your external as well as the internal teams. So that way I way ahead, and I thought RPA it's a growing field a few years back, and now also you see a lot of opportunities in RPA. And what I felt the biggest advantage was from a BA role, since I was not into hardcore coding or development, it was very easy for me to pick up uh, RPA because you can easily.
Understand the
So amazing
process.
part is you can just drag and drop and you can do automation. So when you are doing it for the first time with lesser the effort, you don't have to write lines and lines of code, debug it, and you can get things done. So when you have your basic flow working, you say, okay, that's great. So that way it started. And as I told you, I always love playing around. Like all the kids who are in IT, they would love to play around with the technology, and it's a delight if you are able to achieve even a basic automation.
Yeah, for the first time, it is always a joy to run the hello world and the message box.
Yes,
Then we
yes, yes.
started with the path. But you are already in a senior engineer role. You know, maybe knowing a little bit of coding before you started your career as a BA. But what do you actually want to know about coding before starting your RPA development role? Not a BA role, but development role. What are things that you need to know? The basic things.
So I would say since I started my journey with the, I would name it as UiPath, which is the leading RPA vendor. So I started my journey with UiPath. I first undertook their trainings, but yeah, as you rightly mentioned, I had technical background. I knew basics of programming. That has really helped me in the journey. So when you are actually you start your workflow, you want exception handling, etc. So you should have a knowledge of how try catch block works, or so that basic sense how finally works. So all those things you might. So if you are from a programming background, it's very easy for you to pick up. You say, okay, I've already read this, I know how to implement it. And if you see a lot of string format commands or a lot of string manipulation commands like split, etc. So there are activities available, but you could if you have more hands on, but you can do it over the period of time. So once you start your journey, even if you are from a non, I would say if you have not done hardcore programming, etc., and you don't know much of programming, you can actually start learning those syntax. It doesn't require you to have a great deal of knowledge of other things. But yeah, I would say because if you are picking up data types like array, or what is the advantage of using a dictionary over list, etc., like so those kind of things do matter, because when you are designing your automation, when it comes to scale, etc., best practices, I would definitely not discount like coding is not at all required, won't say this, but to build advanced workflows or optimized workflows, basic knowledge of coding is required. You might not require in depth of them, but yeah, basic is
You
required.
need
As
to
I told
know.
you, for data manipulation or for string manipulation, it's good to have it. even if you can search it and you can use it, but you should understand what you are copy pasting or using it, so that you can tweak it in future. So
the
yeah, that
function
way
of
I feel. Yeah, so all
what
those things
is
like
it is.
link
Yeah.
expressions, etc., these are like advanced concepts. Maybe basic developer who is starting with journey doesn't require it, but they actually do a great deal of improvement in your code in terms of speed, etc. Or like dictionary for the say,
Yeah.
like you, if you are using a key value pair, it's very fast to retrieve. In list you would iterate one after another, or an array you have to iterate one index, second, like first index, second index, third index. In dictionary, since it's a key value pair, you directly refer to a queue, so it's much more faster. When you are dealing with a lot of data, all those things do matter. Big O notation, like like if you're using a lot of for loops, etc., your big O, it would be order of n square, order of n cube, etc. So depending, all those basic idea of those big O notations is required when you are building projects at scale, or in terms which are heavy load projects. There's a lot of data wrangling or massaging. In those cases
Data.
it's do require, but I still people to encourage. Like I also started, I did my MBA. I was almost forgotten almost all the stuffs which I was doing in the gap of 2 years. It's very normal for people to forget. So I would say it shouldn't be an inhibitor. You shouldn't say, "Ki, no, no, I won't never touch the coding. I will never read through the stuffs." In the journey, as you progress, you build your first workflow, second workflow, or third project, fourth project. So as soon as you start building, you will come to realize you just go through YouTube content. A lot of content is there, and meantime you also learn basic programming. Like for if you know VB.NET or C Sharp, it plays a very good role if you are doing related to UiPath. There are other open source Python based RPA tools. If you have a knowledge of Python, it's pretty easy to learn those RPA tools. So yeah, that way I feel basic knowledge of programming always gives you an added advantage.
And we now we know what we need basic of programming, and we also need to understand the business side of the process as well, for who is starting, just to know the basics of RPA. And what are the sources when you started? Because when you started, I don't think we have these much of large communities and um, YouTube videos or anything. There are not much content before, I can say 2018 or 17. There is not much content, and there is no any information about the hard parts of creating a custom activity or doing anything of that sort. What are your sources of study at that point when you started?
So actually, the biggest source, since I started with UiPath. So let me take UiPath. I believe majority of the people do use UiPath, assuming that thing. So since I started with UiPath, so you had UiPath Academy at that point in time. So I did academy courses. At the same time, during my office, I started with a project, started building basic workflows, starting demoing to the other business users, as you rightly mentioned, and which it's a pretty important role for a PA. Why are we doing this automation? Is it worth doing that automation at the first place? You have a project charter which you sign, like, yeah, it's worth proceeding with this automation. So those things, you actually, you and before starting anything, you should actually ask why question. Why are we doing it? Is it worth doing it, worth investing our time? So that's important thing, because if you have the why answer, you will always go to what we has to do, how we have to do. So you can do why, what, and how. You can do it later. So those three things actually you have to do it in a like actually as a practice. Every developer should have that in their mindset, ki why are we doing it, what we are doing, like what purpose does it solve, like
And
is
how
it
you can
trying to,
optimize it?
and how is the process which is actually the part of a designer and the developer. So he has to design how he would be doing, how he would be approaching a problem. So all those things are very important. But as you mentioned, as you correctly mentioned about the sources, I started with the academy trainings, which they were there. Then you had at that time community was starting. So what we had a great
Yes, yeah.
advantage in our company was, we had when the company was also, these RPA vendors were also starting. So we had those customer support in place. So if you are if there is enterprise licenses.
Any
So
room.
usually you have a customer success manager who would help you. So that way we had external UiPath consultants also came in for us. So usually you learn a lot from your seniors or just by looking at them. So how they started coding, we actually learned them how they handle the exception handling. So many scenarios is like something you don't learn as a theory. Maybe after academy you would think no, but if you read through other people's code, which is sometimes I believe it's a tedious task and sometimes boring also while going through other person's code. But yeah, you'll learn a lot if you see other person's coding. You have to actually ask them why have you done this. So when you ask them why you have done this thing, like let's say people do get sometimes, like I'm just giving an example. Let's say you get a generic error, click generic error. So usually I would say some people would
Yeah,
put it in a retry scope, like retry after 2 seconds, like three times. So all those nitty gritties and tips and tricks you will come to know if you see some experienced developer doing it. And once you try to absorb, take those tips and tricks from them and implement it, and try to. And now, since I told you, now even the community is building, so you have now lots and lots more of tips and tricks.
lots of. Yeah,
But yeah, I would say usually for learning, you should follow onion structure. You try to go through the material at whole material first, like what is there in the
the
whole development.
documentation, the product documentation
So
or the product tutorials first.
documentation, yeah, but at least academic courses you do. Then you
Yeah,
build in depth of that. Like let's say you have done selectors, orchestrator, other things. You have learned all those things. Now you go into details of it. Like find, let's say there is a advanced thing like find children, etc. All those kind of activity. So then you try to explore all those things. Then you deep dive into AI center, document understanding, etc. Because those are
but
things which are actually more advanced concepts. Once you optimize your
yeah,
workflow, you would want to learn link queries, etc. So all those things would come over the period of time. So nothing, certain times we speak these terms, so certain people might be boggling like, oh, this is too much. But I think so you should take your time and you should learn. uh, for some people it might, you might quickly learn it. The people who are from non-tech backgrounds might take time for them because they have to read material multiple times or
material.
something.
Yeah,
But I think so
that
at the
will
end of
take
the
time.
day everybody would know, yeah, it takes time.
And there is one comment. Let me pull this here. Are you able to see it? And Vasu says, "Thank you both for your time and doing this live event. And do you have any list of coding skills to learn C sharp in UiPath?"
So actually, I would ask you to go through, like take some course on C sharp. Let's say you go to, if you have access to LinkedIn Learning, you would take a course on LinkedIn Learning. You have a lot of courses on Udemy. Those are pretty affordable also, and you can directly go to YouTube also. You have a lot of people who are teaching C sharp. So I don't think so. You have to go into the depth of C sharp in terms of classes,
Only for
interfaces,
UiPath.
etc.
If you are only
For
looking at
UiPath,
UiPath,
yeah, if you're only looking at UiPath, I don't think so you need to go into that much depth in terms of classes, interfaces, etc., inheritance, etc., to understand that. But yeah, in start of it itself, they will tell you certain basic commands. What is the difference between array and a list? The each has their own advantages as well as disadvantages. But those basic concepts which they will teach you in the starting of, like date time manipulation, you will have idea of what timestamp. There's a data type known as timestamp when you are handling delays, etc. So how will you dynamically use? So all those things you will come to know if you do a basics of C sharp. But I think so maybe you can simultaneously do UiPath and at the same time try to look for those things. Let's say if you are seeing some date time manipulation thing, so try to look for what they are using it, why they are using it. Try to go through the MSD and documentation. That will give you a brief idea. But
that
yeah,
is more.
you can always
That will give you
do it
more idea.
simultaneously, I
Go
would
to.
suggest. Yeah, because if you just go through C sharp, C sharp, you might someday you'll say, no, I'm tired. I've learned so much of C sharp, and there is a lot of things, and you don't need them as such because the
Necessary.
agent of,
That is not
yeah,
that much necessary.
that might not be necessary, and you might end up wasting your time. I won't say wasting a time, but it might, you might get think, no, this is too much. I don't want to go into RPA
Learn
space. I want
UiPath.
to change it. Yeah, yeah. So I won't discourage you to go into. Please do try. RPA is a great field to be in,
Technology.
technology, and it's a great space to be in, and I see a pretty bright future for it, uh, at least few years from now.
Yes, and the next question. Every time I interact with someone, this is the same question that I face. How to practice RPA, right?
Oh,
These are
RPA
all
actually.
activities, and you can just drag and drop them. But how to really practice it and get become good at it?
So actually, it's a very good question. And how do you practice it? Actually, I see there are websites. Actually, if you go to like Bots DNA,
What's
yeah,
Yes,
so probably Aditya might share a link with you in the chat maybe later on. So
in
Bots
the
DNA
description or
people are
yeah.
doing great job. Like Sudhir sir, he has done a great initiative in developing that Bots DNA. So you can practice those and lot of. So you can take up like you go to website. You say I want to fill a form. You can say dummy fill form activity. So a lot of Selenium already. Let's say you are doing a web automation. In case you are learning a desktop automation, you try look for let's say you want to do a calculator automation, so you try to look how do you optimize your calculator code, the desktop automation, it's using your calculator app. You try to do that, like, and there is like in the first when you will build an automation, you'll try to define like 1 to let's say 0 to 9, you'll define all the keys. But you how do you make the selector generic, how do you make a single workflow? So all those things you can try. uh, and there are, I think so, if you or probably I can share it later on with Aditya. There are certain applications, desktop applications, which you can just take it on your system, you can use it, some basic like order processing, so you can try that.
Yeah.
For web to for web application, if you have to do web automation, so you have numerous Selenium websites. So if you can just type Selenium demo websites, like Selenium demo or something like those kind of website, I can probably ping you. So you can do those you can easily learn web automation through them. You try to handle, how do you handle a checkbox, radio button, drop down list, etc., multi select. So all those things you can easily learn.
And what is your strategy on practicing it? Like, let's say there are activities. Whenever we talk to someone, it is activities. If you learn activities, and that's it on a path. That is not like that, right? You need to know the problem statement of the use case and how you refine it, and that is the practice that makes you get confidence on RPA, right? What is your take
Take
on
on
it?
it. Okay. So actually, as you, it's a great question. Actually, as you like at first glance, it seems we are just putting activities. It's a drag and drop. But yeah, you have to learn activities, and even if you don't know, there are plethora of activities available. It's not possible, humanly possible, for someone to
You
know
don't know
all the activities.
every activities.
I myself say there are so many packages available in UiPath that I myself I won't, at least I won't claim that I know all the activities. There must be some activities which I wouldn't have known. So usually you would go to the tools documentation, and it's very project specific also. So usually the more you do a projects, more you will learning be. And this first thing is you have to do a lot of projects, because whatever you would practice, the real world scenarios are real world scenarios. So when you see a
Yes.
real business case or a business scenario, what it will take your learning to next height. And the second thing is, if you have seniors, or you want to you have some mentors, etc., or you can probably connect with people on LinkedIn for mentorship, etc. So you can, what matters most, as I was telling you, is seeing them, how do they code, how do they approach a problem. Let's say you run into some issues. Let me give a very simple example for people. Let's say you have a click image activity. So by default, the click image is like set at like accuracy set at 0.8. So it might not work with zero point 0.8 accuracy. You might have to lower it down to zero point 0.7, zero point 0.6. So those things, I think that comes with practice. Those ideas would come over the years, like over practice. And the first thing is you have to do a lot of projects. It's all project based learning. Or even I learn different things. Each and every project has some or the other learning in terms of this thing. You have multiple integrations. Let's say someday you get an opportunity to do a Salesforce automation. So Salesforce is the number one CRM tool, and so it's a SaaS based tool. And if you do, there is a lot of UiPath activities on Salesforce, UiPath official activities. So in reality, you wouldn't have learned it, or you wouldn't have gone it through in your basic course. But once a project comes, you'll come to know, you will have access to the Salesforce environment. You'll start building it, you'll learn it, explore it. So that way, a lot of API based automation which we do. So it's actually, there is a HTTP activity for that. But how do you how different APIs work, what all has to be passed in the header, etc. All those things you'll come to know with practice as per the project. And the second thing is you would need somebody to guide you, help you,
Mentor, yeah.
because
Yeah.
yeah, best practice is how do you scale a workflow, and it's not just one piece of it. There are multiple challenges, like if you are defining a robot, what is the resolution, etc. Logs to console, where to put info, like even the logging itself, whether you have to log it at info level or debug level, where to put warn message, where to put error message. So all those things, when you are doing a production deployment, or when you're creating a production ready code, you have to pay heed to all those things, and these things do come with practice. And just by looking at your mentors or seniors, learning from them, I am in learning, I also learn from my senior as well as from my junior. So I also learn this way, or from other people, looking at the other people code, you come to know about somebody could have done it differently, so you find, okay, this approach is better, I could have done it this way also. So this is kind of a continuous learning phase, and you also, even if your production code, you always, there's some or the other bug, you try to improve it. So it's kind of a continuous improvement cycle which you have to take it. You won't say, look, I have done the project, it's all done, deployed, tested, etc. Now I will say bye bye to the project. No, there are cases where it might fail, or some scenario might have skipped, etc. So that's an ongoing learning process, ongoing this thing. So yeah, my two tips: first would be more projects, second would be guidance from your um, peers and
Anyone.
seniors,
Reach
etc.
out to
Anyone.
someone who can guide you.
Yeah, even I certain times see my juniors also using certain things which I thought, okay, oh, I didn't knew this thing, or I didn't remember to use this, I did it other way, but your way is better. So you should be open to that kind of a thing. Even peer-to-peer review system is also pretty good. In certain companies there is superior review, and certain companies have peer-to-peer review. So I believe peer-to-peer reviews helps a lot. uh, uh,
Yes, it certainly helps.
uh,
And the first one is practicing the use case and knowing the statement of how you are doing it, where you are doing it. That will, okay, if you are doing one use case on a web automation and you don't know, you are not don't know the problem statement, you're just mimicking what other person is doing, you don't get anything. When you know the problem statement and understand what you are doing, and then you can relate to another activity which you don't know, and you can see the documentation and whether that a particular activity for that activity is available or not.
Yeah, very true. So you, there are many times you have to go back to documentation. I personally have to go to a lot of YouTube content. Like certain people might love to read, some people like me prefer to watch a video. So it's very personal preference. But yeah, it's everybody has to, some or the other time have to look up. And certain times, even if I tell you I must have implemented something, let's say document understanding, DU, like invoice processing, if I have done it for one of the clients, it's also differ, your experience also differs. Like for certain cases you would have easily figured out those things in invoice processing, and for other clients you might run into issues. I might have done it like few months back, so now if I'm doing a new project I might have forgotten those things. So that way what happens is, if you have certain things like lesson learned, etc., usually if somebody, people who love to, maybe it's a digital, you can have digital notes as well as hard copies depending upon your personal choice. So all those things do happen. So certain times if you have those digital notes, or if you have like copy based notes, you can always refer to them quickly. Okay, okay, these are the steps I followed, so you can quickly recollect. But that's just my
Yes.
suggestion. Many people may prefer to, certain people can hold it in their minds, etc. So it's very personal choice, like reading documentation or going through videos. It differs from person to person, but there's nothing right and wrong in this thing. It's just a suggestion.
Yes, you want to know what activity you might use for checking an element. You need to check for element exists or not. You need to understand that, and based on that, you can search on the internet. So
Yeah. Let's say
that
if you
that
are
is the
running into a
reason.
lot of
Yeah.
issues, yeah, like
Hmm.
anchor based activities. So if you're not able to find a selector, stable selector for something, let's say, you would use anchor base. In anchor also, and you so all those things like anchor base, in anchor you can use find element or find image. So where to use what, all those things do come with practice, with scenarios, like different scenarios you'll run into. Okay, I'm not able to figure out those things, so you know, okay, this is not working through selector, let me try anchor base. If it's not working with that, can I do a image automation? So all
Hmm.
those things, it comes like, if you have a speed and it's working, you use simulate. So all those things you'll come to know as and when you do more and more projects over time. So those things.
Yes, and we have one more question. Let me track
And
the
I would
time.
suggest
Are you able
people to
to?
do a lot of challenges also. Challenges even, I believe, give you a great learning in terms of how do you optimize your code, how do you speed up a code. So those, I don't think so in terms of best practices they would be doing, because certain times people would be hard coding, etc. But they will tell you how different things works. How you can speed up the same thing. Like somebody is able to do it in 10 seconds, another person is able to do it in 5 seconds. How and why, what activities are used. So those learning through the people who have solved the challenges, going through their code, adds a great value to your knowledge base.
Yes, and the recent challenge from Leon
Yeah,
pattern.
that's great. Actually, I find it
That's
pretty intriguing. It's a very good challenge. I would suggest people to do give their
so,
hands on. It's a web based
and I guess
automation
it has two challenges now, version one and version two.
version. So I did it on version 2, I believe, and I think so.
Yes,
Everybody
yeah,
should give it a try whenever they have their free time, and it's just a great learning. Actually, you'll try, you'll figure out, you'll enjoy actually
you'll
those challenges.
whenever you get errors, only you will note. And this is one more comment. You thanks for that, and thank you for joining. And please suggest where I can get some projects for learning purpose. As Devashish already mentioned, bots DNA, which is created by Sudhir Namagada. If you're not familiar with that, you can go and search botsdna.com, where you can get the use cases, and you also have relevant videos with that, where you can see the solution. So that is one. If you have any, you can tell.
I think so. Bots DN is a great for learning automation, web automation. You can download actually if you have to do, as I told, desktop automation. You can try doing it with your calculator app, and probably there are certain dummy apps. So if you search, or probably I can provide later on. So there are certain dummy exes which you can try doing for desktop automation. Those things you
And
can try and
UiPath
learn.
also, I guess, crm.exe, there is a dummy application where you can
Yeah,
access
yeah,
any
that
UiPath
UiPath
as well.
also is there. Yeah, yeah. And even UiPath has that Acme website also. It's pretty good. This thing. There's an
For
Acme
the web.
website. If you would have done UiPath Academy, there is an Acme website. It's a very good again for doing web-based automation. You'll learn data scraping, etc. Like you have to scrape all of the table structure. All those things you'll come to know from those websites. So yeah, those are the few websites you can, even to learn a web-based automation, you can directly look for Selenium practice. If you just type it on Google, you'll see a lot of web-based dummy applications where you can practice fill forms, etc. So all those things, handling iframe, etc. All those things you'll come to know from those
Yeah.
websites.
And also don't look for doing for the purpose of doing it, don't do more projects. If you are doing one web automation process, or you are doing for selectors concept, learn how the dynamic selector works. And there are two other selectors, which is regex selector, and
CSS
you can
selector.
implement for the same click, you can implement different things and see how it is working and how it is performing. Then you can able to distinguish between, okay, this is for this purpose and this is for this purpose. And if you're doing it in different way, you can't really recognize what is going there.
Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, it's about, because if you're practicing same thing again and again, there is no point in, you won't have a great learning. So that's why I usually say, because certain times when we have practiced certain websites, you would say, but as I told you, the real world scenarios are real world. So you have to work on more
Yeah.
and more projects, because you will go into challenges when and where, like with different applications. Let's say it's production case, you might have to work with database activities. So you can actually try, if you have to learn database activities, you can install SQL Server. You can install that edition and community
Hmm.
edition, and you can practice those things. So yeah, there are for those
Or
things, like
yeah, and you can easily convert an Excel as a database, and you can
yeah,
use the database
X.
activity.
Yeah, so that way also, that is also, as Aditya mentioned, it's one of the, so usually let's say you have to do a lot of Excel manipulation.
Hmm.
So in that case, either you have you use Excel activities, or let's say you have to group by and you have to fetch some data. Let's say so you have to group a data by the person's name, and there is a lot of, like, let's say customer has purchased multiple things from a some outlet, so you have to group it by the customer. So in that case, what happens is, if you can convert your Excel into, as you mentioned, if you are able to convert your Excel into uh, connector, like, you have a OLEDB connector, you can convert it into a database and you can directly fire a SQL, like a group with a group by clause. So that is one part of it. Then you have link queries to help you with group by. So as I told you, there are multiple ways of doing things, and those things would come only with practice. And and I believe even Aditya, since he knows, because he must have practiced it, he must have seen it on the forums, etc. That's why he knows it. So this everything, all those tips and tricks would come with practice and by searching for, uh, like,
Yes.
browsing through a lot of content.
And that is okay. Now I don't want to install it. Then I seen somewhere that okay, we can use Excel as a database as well, so that we can practice database activities. That is how you need to look at it. But don't just go that okay, I need to have this. I don't have that. I'm not practicing it. Look for an alternate way so that we can practice that. And if you want how to convert it, then in rpalearners.com, you already have a blog where it can tell you how to make it. And that is why I return that blog so that I might forget so many things which I have done. So that is the reason why I writing those blogs, so that it will be helpful for me as well whenever I want to read it. And there is another comment that Nidhi, thanks for joining and
Thank you so much, Nidhi,
thank you.
for your kind words.
And everyone who is looking, you can also connect with Nidhi. He is one of the UiPath MVPs. She can also mentor you on all the other things in RPA as well. And okay, so now the practice is also completed. And how you, what are the responsibilities? Let's say, what are the responsibilities of a developer and an RPA architect? Just distinguish
So
between
actually,
what the developer do and that.
So it's a at a high level, I would say it's a business, it's a job title which you have. You shouldn't think like somebody is senior, junior, etc. Everybody is same. We are working for a common goal, which is to
Not,
add a
we
value,
need to
deliver a value
learn
for,
every day. In
yeah,
IT. There is no one
in
who
IT
knows
there is.
everything.
Yeah, it's a ocean actually. Even if you know, if you can collect few drops from it, it would be still a big deal. There are
Yeah.
plethora of technology stacks available. So it's a big ocean. You have to collect few drops, and it's you must be eager and learning enough to collect as many drops of water you can collect from that ocean. So it's very, it depends on person to person, his interest, etc., skill level, etc. So multiple things play a role in that. But what is, if I would say, even like a business analyst, RPA BA is also there. There is a RPA support guy, RPA developer, RPA architect. So all these are job titles, but at the end of the day, what matters is, from its company to company, those things might differ. Like RPA might be expected to, an RPA architect might be expected to foresee a lot of projects, drive certain internal learnings among, guide new developers, uh, go through design documents, do reviews of the code, etc. But it's very company specific. He might have to do his own development, bring up new technologies, or evaluate multiple different technologies. So it's RP at a core of it, and then you have multiple things. You have DevOps around it in terms of
How to
CI/CD pipelines.
optimize.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have AI/ML coming into picture. So all those hyper automation, which we are talking about. So all those things, at RPA being the core of it, you have a lot of things alongside it to function. So I believe all those things, maybe RPA is expected to those things. So I've just given a brief, like in terms of reviews, drive best practices, uh, drive excellence in your team, motivate team, guide new team members, all those things um, is the role. But I think so even the senior RPA developers have to do the same thing. And it's just about the mindset. Even a young guy who is joining, he just have a mindset like, I want to try different things, different integrations. It's just a what, maybe a, with a job title you have to do that. But if you are a developer and you are still practicing those things, like guiding your colleagues, helping them, open to knowledge sharing, which is very important, because more you share, more you gain yourself. So all those kind of things, you are actually yourself. Even your title is RPA developer, but your mindset is of an architect, or you have a learning mindset. I won't say architect mindset, but you have a learning mindset. So that is more important. And even from the BA perspective, like BAs have that perspective, like why they are doing the, why we should take this project, what value it would deliver. So even if a developer have that mindset is very important. So you should understand why are you doing it, what value does it help bring the client, let's say in terms of cost reduction, or in terms of improved SLAs, improved accuracy, all those things. So it's, even if a developer understands the business, it's great. So I would think ki you should have an experience on from all perspective. From the BA side, try to learn things, how they are approaching a problem, how they are doing the ROIs, how you can try different things. So it's actually, if you have an experience of a life cycle, your even your horizon would be broader. So you would be able to think in a different direction. If you just take a requirement and just simply jump into designing, etc.,
Designing.
it would do, if it would do you a good. But I would, as a best practice, I would always suggest you to ask why, how, and what I am doing.
If
Like
someone knows
I got,
the RPA life cycle better, it will
yeah,
be most
it is a
helpful.
value add. It's always a value add. And as you, even you may grow senior in the role, maybe you would be doing it later on in your life also. So there's nothing, but I would say more early you start, it's better it is. That's the game.
And when he understand, it's also helpful for the developer role.
Yeah, it's developer, and you have to. So all those things do happen, like understanding ROI, how ROI is done, calculated. All those things are added value add. So that would make you a wholesome person altogether. So you, since you know development, you know how these things work, and you would be able to connect with the guys better. Even if you, let's say,
Yeah.
even Aditya, you have an experience, you have done so many client calls, you would know if somebody who knows what my client is doing, what is the business perspective, what value do they bring to the table. Let's say I'm doing some automation, which is piece of some larger, let's say larger enterprise automation, which is leading it to some, let's say some $1 million saving. I'm just giving an example, vague example. But what, when you talk to a client, you say, "Are this automation is a small piece, but it is leading to Hello?
Uh, yes, I can hear you now. I think
I think so.
I
I got
lost the
disconnected in middle.
connection.
You able to hear me?
Yes, I can able to hear you now.
Yeah, I think so. In
Just
middle,
give
my
me a
connection
minute.
must have fluctuated.
Okay, so we got another comment. How can I connect? Like GS gaming, and we maybe rephrase it. What you're talking about? You're talking about the SQL that we talked. How to connect with the database, or how to connect with UiPath MVPs. I'm not sure what you're asking. So let's go for the second. There is another comment. Surya Narayana. Can you please tell me what interviews expect from 3 to 5 years experienced RPA developers? And you can probably answer it.
Sure. So, 3 to 5 is a good years of experience to have it in RPA domain, which is itself is a pretty young domain. So, what is, so you would be expected to actually, what basics they would expect you to know certain basics. As we discussed, certain tips and tricks they would expect you. You would be expected to know certain cues, like why do you use cues, when to use cues. So cues do come into picture. You might have to have an idea about link, when to use, what to use. So I, those things, and the more the project. So for you it might be, okay, have you done SAP automation, SAP automation, or have you worked with, I was taking an example like Salesforce, have you done all those, have you handled REST APIs. So for you all those would be an expectation, because 3 to 5 years people would expect you would have done a lot of production ready. You must have built a lot of production ready code. So they would ask you in terms of best practices, when to use what in terms of exception handling. So those are the things which you would be doing. So those are the things which would be more asked from you. Apart from the basic, it would be mostly related to certain advanced concepts like link, usage of queues, when to use what, how do you judge which RPA would work. So for you, more questions would be what I believe is more on the project related side, rather than on the basic side, because since you have 3 to 5 years of experience in RPA, you it might be, do you have an idea about, you must have like invoice processing, document understanding, all those things. Do you have an idea about it, how to do, what to do? So all those things would be more on your plate in comparison to a person or a fresher who is, or with a lesser experience, maybe 1 year's experience. For 1 year experience, the more questions would be more related to basic, all those things. But with 3 to 5 years experience, the questions would be more related to advanced concepts and mostly project based. So how many integrations you have done, or how much automation with other applications, or what all applications you have done, like have you used Oracle, EBS, uh, SAP, Salesforce, etc. So all those things, I would say, would matter more on your resume.
I guess that answered your question, Suryanarayana. And GS Gaming, how can we connect to you people? Okay, I given the LinkedIn profile links for you in the chat of Devashish and mine. You can connect with us, and you can connect with any UiPath MVP that are happy to help you, or any RPA person that is sharing the content will be happy to help you. And if you have any specific questions, you can ask it here. And I guess those are the questions. And I have one more question, which is, whenever someone wants to enter into RPA domain, what are the roles in RPA, starting from the basic roles? I guess you got disconnected again. Just wait for, let's wait for 4 minutes. Okay, meanwhile, and let me also tell you some of the use cases that you can practice, right? Meanwhile, Devashish comes again. I will tell you what are the sources that you can use. One is you can use bots DNA, which is created by Steer Nimugada. And let me give that to you. Is created by Sudhir, and it is pretty much, it has pretty much every case from the simple to the complex use cases, right? I'm sharing the link in the chat so that we can have a look at it and we can practice that. And Leon Patro, who is another person who, it has two um, challenges. One is the version 1, the version 2, where you can practice it. And the rpachallenge.com, it also has some practice use cases. Apart from doing all these use cases, right, you need to think that whenever you're doing something on RPA, you need to think on, let's say you are implementing same thing for the business users as well in the coming days. So let's say you are clicking on a particular element. What are the properties that the click element has? Don't do 2 3 projects for the same element or the activity. Use those activities on the same click so that you can see the difference of how it is performing it, and what are the differences that each property is having it. And let me bring up the comment as well. And it is very interesting to learn RPA using UiPath, and I can implement them in my day-to-day life. And even it is helping my parents who works day in and day out with systems. Oh, that is very good. And RPA is not only limited to UiPath. There are so many other tools and the open source tools as well, which will be coming soon. One is Open RPA, and other one is the Robocop. And you can look at them as well while learning. If you are interested in Python based programming of the robots, then you can look at Robocop, which uses Python as well, and robot framework. And it is good to hear that your parents are using RPA. And can we use Python instead of C Sharp and VBA? and you can use, but in UiPath you can use, you can create a Python file, and then you can run that particular script, Python script, and you can run that script. Sorry, I guess is back. Let me add him to the stream. Okay, I'll come back again.
Apologies, Aditya. Apologies, spoke. Sorry, my internet is giving me a
That
hard time.
that generally happens whenever there is a live or a demo. That generally happens. You will have glitches.
Apologies for that. So
Yes.
I
So
see
this is another
use
question.
Python
Can
instead
we
of
use
C sharp
Python
and
instead of
VBA.
C Sharp and VBA?
So if you see a lot of I think so here I have to obviously name Aditya. His channel is doing some great work. He has put a lot of content on Python based RPA tool which is Robocorp. Even I have put certain some content alongside it. Yeah, you can, and if you are aware about Python, you can directly so for web based automation. You can obviously use a lot of libraries are there in Python. But I would say RPA tool for Python directly, if you want to use Python as a native language in that RPA tool. Robocorp is one which comes to my mind at the top. Then you have Tag UI, which is again great initiative. You can explore it as again great tool for doing web automation. So these two are the tools which come to my mind at the top when you're talking about Python. And yeah, and even with Python, you can people from the testing background would know they would have used the Selenium web drivers, so you can use those also just to do a web automation. But things get tougher when you have desktop automation or Citrix automation, even with those tools. So yeah,
Yeah, and that is one. Robocorp is the main one which comes in Python, and there is another tool which is Tag UI, but it is still in coming up. Yeah, but as a stable process of the enterprise version, Robocorp is completely on there for
yeah.
that Python. And Suryanarayana saying that thank you Devashish for answering my question, and also thank you for giving this session as well.
Thank you so much, Surya.
And yeah, I, and the levels of organization. Let's say in an organization, what are the levels that a person, let's say I'm want to come into RPA, what are the different levels in an organization? Let's say RPA developer, architect.
So yeah, so usually at any there are for RPA space, if I talk about, so if you talk about the development itself, you have RPA developers, then you have senior RPA developers, but this hierarchy may change. Somebody might call it as RPA developer level
it
1,
it, it, it,
RPA
it it
developer
will
level
vary
2.
from organization to organization,
Yeah, these
basically.
are all job titles, so it might vary based upon your experience, etc. So uh, work experience in RP, etc. It depends upon those. So it from certain organization, but usually if you talk like generically, if we talk about, it's usually what I have seen majority of them time, some people may tell it as RP developer 1, RP developer 2, RP developer 3. Some people call it, usually keep it pretty simple, like RP developer, then you have senior RP developer, then you have RP architect or RP solution architect, etc. So those job titles
Lesson.
do differ from company to company. Then you have RPA BA. So in that case, also there is a journey like normal RPA BA, there is a senior RPA BA, there is a lead RPA BA. So you have RPA lead also. It could come into. So depending on organization to organization, in cases many organizations would have RPA dedicated RPA support teams. So there you have support specialist 1, support specialist 2, you have lead support specialist. So at generic level, I think so it's everywhere is like 2 or 3 different job titles, but the naming convention may differ. Some may call it, instead of developer, some companies decide to call it as a RP designer. So it's
Yeah,
actually it's very common across organizations to
but
have different
what
different
if
job
you,
titles.
let's say junior developer and senior developer, solution architect, technical architect, solution architect, and a business analyst. So these are basically the work of the RPA, right? This is
Yeah,
support work.
this is yeah,
Usually
in
you can
support. So these are the BA development and support. So these three things you would usually find in an enterprise-wide automations. Um, I believe job titles may differ. For BA, there is BA, a senior BA, lead BA, or for a specialist, a support specialist, it will be support specialist 1 to lead support specialist. architect. So usually for architect positions, usually what people look, not just from different tools experience, what is required, then and more exposure to technologies, etc. So all those things. So when you are a lead, when you are let's say you are a technical lead in RPA domain, so you are leading a team, so you tend to expect a certain people skill, so they also play an experience. So over the time you learn people skills, presentations to the client, preparation of the, so other things apart from development, what is important is your communication skills. So usually those things also get important, like business understanding. Certain with experience, if you have been working in certain projects or for certain clients, you will have that domain knowledge. Let's say you are working in finance domain, so you'll understand more. Let's say you are working for a bank, you would understand what is the lending system, etc. So apart from the development, these are the other soft skills which matter. Your communication skills, how you able to well articulate your ideas, which is a very important skill. When you are dealing with clients, you need not give them lot of information, which they might feel, oh, this is too much, he is talking too much. So you have to give how to articulate. That is also an important skill, and that comes
Telling
with
it,
time. And
communicate.
yeah, yeah, communication skills, preparation of powerpoints, which is very downplayed, but yeah, every senior guy would be making powerpoints, etc. So these are certain soft skills, skills which are required.
That are required. And I also shared Devashish's YouTube channel link in the chat, so you can go ahead and subscribe the channel so that you can get the notification when he uploads the new content. And Vaibhav says very informative content. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
thank you.
And there is another comment. If every tool is for automation, what makes the difference in between them to learn? For example, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, etc.
So actually, I won't comment in the, because it's something I think so. It's up to the sales guys of the three vendors. I won't directly comment which is better. So it's actually preference. So if somebody started with UiPath, and if I've been in more in UiPath, I would prefer to have. If I'm doing a complex automation, I would prefer to use UiPath over other tools. But it's not, I'm not saying like other tools are not good and bad. Each tool has their own advantages. So you if you see Microsoft Power Automate, which is not there, but it's again a very upcoming tool, and it's pretty easy actually. It's a low code RPA platform. A lot of activities are available which are very self intuitive. So it depends upon, it's upon very personal preferences. So I have seen people who have come from the Blue Prism background, who have done a lot of automation in Blue Prism. They might have, they feel it's all about comfort. So some people might find it comfortable to do it in. But what I have seen is in a lot of RPA challenges, I have seen people cracking good speeds, like great lesser the time, like great speeds with Blue Prism also, Automation Anywhere also, with UiPath also. So all these three things, I won't compare between the tools. It is something which which would be marketing one tool over the other tool. So, but yeah, it depends upon your personal preferences, choice, and certain tools may be better in some or the other space. Some tool might be lacking in that space. So it's upon what you have at your hand. And I can say like Robocorp. So it's a great tool. Again, it's a Python based tool. It has a great for web automation, but if you see, it's a desktop automation is a little tricky in comparison to other
Other
RPA platform.
tools.
Yeah, so it depends, and it depends upon preferences, etc. Power automated, if you have to do some basic workflow related to more on a Microsoft technologies, which you can do it with any of the three. But since it's a Microsoft tool, so you would expect pretty easy integrations, etc. So it's actually I can't comment, but it's very subjective actually. It depends upon person to person, and each tool has some or the other advantages. And so I can't. So I have seen certain experts, people in Blue Prism also performing great in the RPA challenges. With Automation Anywhere also, I have seen people doing great with UiPath. I have seen there was a RPA challenge where somebody has done it with the VBA itself without using RPA. So
Yes,
it's
yes,
very
yeah.
subjective. It's something depends upon person's
He
skill to skill.
completely.
Yeah, and what is his background he's coming from, and how comfortable is he with that tool.
Yeah, but if you ask me why people are learning different tools, it is okay. Let's say my process use more of a Microsoft tools. Let's say SharePoint, the Outlook process based on those tools. then client would prefer more of a connectors that are given by the tool so that it will be more reliable. There is no other intervention in between. So clients will go to Microsoft Power Automate. If there is something that is doing better in other tool, they will go for that, and you need to learn that tool because you need to implement that. So that
Yeah.
is the difference of learning other tools.
Actually, so it is a client requirement. Let's say client have been using, let's say I'm in a service based company, and let's say the client comes to me and he or she says ki, see, we have been I have, let's say if I've done 50 automations, let's say using UI path. So in that case, they want one, you need to build one automation. So they'll themselves say, no, we already have an enterprise license for UiPath. Why don't you build
Yeah, path.
in UiPath? So it's actually, it plays multiple role. What your client wants, what setup he has, how. So certain times you have, your team is more well trained on, let's say on Blue Prism. They have a lot of, there are certain banks which have Blue Prism licenses, like enterprise wide Blue Prism licenses. So they would come to you and they would say, they would expect you to have Blue Prism, build an automation in Blue Prism. So it's actually very specific to the client requirement. But in terms of, if you talk about in terms of employability, a person who would know more tools would always have
Will get that
added
first
advantage.
preference.
So yeah, it's
Yes.
kind of a, because even clients would prefer, because somebody would prefer to have guys to have intermediate knowledge in multiple tools, so that, because knowledge, you can scale up. Let's say if you have an intermediate knowledge, if you're working on that tool for a longer period of time, you might, your knowledge would obviously increase. But if you have knowledge about other tools, you can easily pick up and scale your knowledge in that particular tool, depending on how and when project comes. So it's just an opinion. People may differ with it, but it's just my opinion. I won't say there's nothing right and wrong about it. Some people may say, no, no, I want to continue with one tool, and that's great. I have seen people who are experts in one tool,
One
and they
tool.
are also doing great in their jobs. They are getting jobs. But only thing is, it depends upon what is your approach, and how do you want to take your career. It's a very personal choice. People want to,
Let's say
some
you,
people
if
prefer, no, no.
you are good at Python, start learning Robocop so that you will add
Yeah,
another tool in your portfolio, and also you will learn it simply because you know you already know Python how to do it.
very true, very
So
true.
that is the only, that depends on your interest. Everything is no code, low code. So simply drag and drop, but not Robocop. Robocop is completely, you need to code it. If you like coding and you want to be in RPA space, then Robocop is the one that you need to go. So those are the custom preferences that you need to make according to you.
Yeah.
And let's show this one. Okay, hi, it's happy to see you. Hi, Harsha. And
Hi,
I
Arsha.
know Harsha, so yeah. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. Let's wait for a couple of minutes. If anyone has any doubts, they will post it. And it is almost 1 hour. Thank you for spending your time. And
Thank you so much, Aditya. It was nice interacting with folks. I hope I've been a value add to the folks.
yes, definitely that this and one more question that I wanted to ask. Let's say when you are implementing something, right? When you start learning some other tools, what you will learn first? Let's say you know UI path, and when you want to start another tool, is it easy to move on to another tool and start learning it from starting, or you have a specific way of doing it?
So I usually try to. So if you have one or the other tool, so let's say you have mentioned about OpenRPA. So OpenRPA looks pretty similar to UiPath. So usually people who would have, though there, as you have done so much content on OpenRPA also, so you would see there is a, it's not directly like apple to oranges, like you use one activity, exactly same activity. You would find that there are activities are different, the way the tool works is different, but in terms of layout, etc., it's pretty similar. So
Design.
what I usually start with is, I usually look for a certain basic, like, am I able to do web automation, am I able to send
Hmm.
mails through it, because that is something which is very basic now, since cloud is the future and a lot of applications are moving to cloud. So you would see a lot of web automation happening in the RPA later on. So with that, what I believe, the first thing which I want to try in a tool, or which I probably look, is, can I fill a form in a tool? First learning, if I'm able to fill a form in a, let's say, on a web application, am I able to send a mail, whether through Outlook or through Exchange or through SMTP, whether I'm able to do that. These are some basic things which, let's say you want to demo it to a customer, so that is something which you first, I'll try to learn and build. But yeah, then exception handling, etc., all those things. So in another tool, you'll try to learn how exception handling happens in this tool. So all those things, you would learn slowly and over the this thing.
Yeah, but if you ask me on how I start learning other tools, let's say you need to learn one tool first and learn the concepts of Excel automation, web automation, and all the other things. Then what, someone might be good at Excel automation or someone might be good at web automation. There is nothing wrong in that. I was, maybe you tend to prefer that, okay, web automation is easy, I can do it, or I can use JavaScript or any other things that you know to optimize it and do it. Whenever you're starting another tool, I will try to start with whatever my basic strength is, how I can understand the tool better. I will start with the Excel automation in the new tool to see how it is working, because in Excel automation we have the input, what is the input, and we also know what is the output that we want to get. So that will
Very
give a little confidence in us. Okay, I was able to handle the tool well. Then I can look for other things which are pretty different. Different in the sense the properties are different, the way of use is different. So start with something you're good at, and that give you the confidence of, okay, I know this.
Yeah, very true.
And GS gaming, thank you, that's very informative. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, GS gaming. Thanks for joining. And I guess there are no other questions, and this is something that we want to cover, how he transitioned and what the resources that he used from going to a BA to an RPA architect. And pretty much it, we covered where to study, where to practice, what are the responsibilities of developer and an RPA architect, what are the levels of organization, and what is the practice strategy of different persons. It will vary from person to person as well. And with that, I think we can conclude this live of the session. And we will, I will do maybe some other live, maybe with another concept. You can comment them in the in the chat or in the comment section, so that we can pick up few more questions and answer them in the future. And thank you. If you want to tell any last words, maybe
Uh,
for someone who is entering into RPA, who want to learn RPA, and or someone who is preparing for interviews.
I'll say RPA is a great. There's a great scope in RPA. I see a lot of potential of a lot of job opportunities in RPA, and it's something which you can, I believe, as we mentioned, it's very easy for somebody to move into RPA with, as Aditya mentioned, there are a lot of low code, no code platforms are available, and they are coming out and they are budding. And in future, I see more and more of that. And so I see it's very easy to transition into RPA role. And over the years, you would see a lot of opportunities in RPA with more and more tools coming in. So I think it's a good space to be in, and I would wish you a luck to all of you. And the only suggestion is, do more and more projects. That's all, and try to go through content, connect to the guys, let's people who are been in this industry. So all those things, attend those webinars, community webinars. They add a lot of value. So whenever you have free time, please do go through those community webinars. So there you'll see a lot of experts coming in, giving, showcasing, demoing certain features. So go ask questions on forums. That helps. So you'll see, let's say somebody, let's say you ping an individual, he may, or he or she may be busy, he might not respond to you. But if you ask it on forums, the advantage is, in spite of in whatsoever time zone you are putting a question is in, whosoever is there online sees your question, would try to reply to you. So that way, it's a great, it's a very useful platform,
advantage
and
to
it
learn.
would be helpful to you also. So forums, community webinars, all those things are very helpful actually.
Yes, and if you are specifically looking at um, BA or business analyst, I would suggest go to Nicholas Sachevarapu. It's a YouTube channel, and you can get a lot of content about BA as well, business analyst in RPA. And GS gaming, any part-time jobs available? And in IT, I don't think it is a part-time. It is a freelance or a consultant in IT. I mean, if I'm not wrong.
So I can't comment because I personally have not done any. I've been in full time, but yeah, there are a lot of freelance opportunities available on RPA. This thing,
Where I can do
uh,
my
so you can usually do look out for those kind of freelancing opportunities as Aditya mentioned. But I don't think so. Maybe if you are doing it simultaneously, like freelancing work along with full time. So if you are able to manage it well, that's great. But yeah, I since I have not
it,
done
it
any
will it will
part
it
time
will
on
go
that.
wrong some or the other time when you don't
Yeah.
have
So
time, because everything, if everything is going on smoothly, it is fine. But when you want to stay, you need to stay for 14 hours or 15 hours on any shift. So that time it will affect. And where I can do my existing job and get into RPA by doing this and become comfortable.
okay,
And
okay. So you want to transition into RPA and okay.
RPA,
So yeah, I think so. First, I would suggest you to explore in your existing organization if there are RPA opportunities because I did the same way. I saw there was RPA opportunity. I thought it was something new which was coming up in my company. I could add value. So I transitioned it from my what I was doing. I was working in LMS domain, and my manager was also kind enough to help me transition into that. So I would first suggest you to look in the company itself. Meantime, I can't suggest, but I have not done it, so I won't be an expert to comment. Like if you start freelancing, and will you if you are able to manage, it's great. I don't know because I have not done it, so um, uh, as much. So I can't comment on that. But if you can manage and you can get able to get, but usually when you are doing it as acting as a consultant, they would expect you to have an expertise or to deliver you in time.
yes,
So if
yeah,
you are starting new, it might be tough
it is
for
not a good
you
idea
to,
to do that.
yeah, to run. You might run into challenges completing those assignments. So, but yeah, I would say, and I would say if you try applying for starting positions, RPS positions, a lot of RP opportunities are there. Um, I think so. Those ways you can start your journey in RPA.
Yeah, if you're starting, if you don't know RPA, I don't think you need to look for any job, because nowadays people are expecting RPA developers to be an experienced people, maybe 2 years or 3 years. Because uh, if you are in IT, you get to know a lot of things about how to deal with system, or how the applications work, what are the loads and what are the process and all the other things about the process. So people are expecting you to be 2 years or 3 years experienced people, so that you can, okay, if there is any issue, you can directly understand it, mostly, most probably.
So yeah,
Instead of it,
you can look for jobs which are less than a year, so they want freshers in RPA. So
yes, maybe
those,
an
if you're
internship
starting with RPA,
to get a better
yeah,
idea.
yeah. So those would be helpful because directly you doing outside assignments, which would expect you to be an expert. I don't think so. It would be feasible for you to complete such kind of assignments. But it's just my opinion. I might be wrong also. So.
Yeah. Then yeah, look for an internship or something like that if you want to transition, or look for something which your organization can provide. That will be good if your organization can accept your transition. And I guess that's it. And we don't have any other things. Maybe we can plan something for some other day. And thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Ashish, for
Thank you
spending your
so much,
valuable time.
Aditya.
Yeah,
Same. Thank you so much for inviting me to your channel.
yeah. Thank you everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye bye, folks. Have a bye bye.